Hey, everyone. Welcome to the October 22nd, 2019 meeting of the East Bridgewater Finance Committee. We'll open the meeting at 6:32. All right, first, welcome to our new members, our three newest members. So for the sake of the viewing audience, we'll go through. I can introduce you, you can introduce yourselves. Well, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Sure,
Start
yeah,
with you, Joe.
where's the camera? I don't know.
Yeah, just talk to us.
Find you.
Doug
Yeah.
Conley, I lived on 155 Station Rock Ave. I'm a program manager for Accenture. And I do this in my spare time, I guess.
Yes, you do now.
Kevin Riley from Surrey Lane, and I'm an attorney by trade.
Welcome, and
Dave Walsh I live in East Bridgewater on Stone Meadow Drive, of course, and I work in healthcare.
excellent. Well, welcome to the three of you. May
It's a pleasure to be here.
this-
Thank you, guys.
May this be a productive year, right? All right.
It's good being pulled, isn't
It does. This is probably the first time in a while that we have, probably since the very beginning of last year,
Wow.
that we've been a whole committee.
That's good.
So let's keep it that way. Yes, really. Yeah, yeah. All right, so Brian Noble, our esteemed town administrator, has joined us this evening
Thank you.
and is going to provide us with a little update.
Okay, so updates. We're starting to get the departments organized to get into the budget season. We're gonna try to start just a smidge earlier this year for several reasons. You have an inexperienced town administrator, and I have relatively new finance committee, so we're gonna do this together. Traditionally, the budget process has been that the departments are requested to put in a 2% budget and a real needs budget. In reviewing that process, the 2% is a bit wishful thinking, and the real needs budget turns out to be an exercise in fantasy. So traditionally, town administrators will say to departments, give me level services, give me level funding, and I think what I'd like to pursue this year is level-headed. I really want to have the opportunity for the department heads to come in and pitch what they think they need to effectively run their department without dabbling in Disneyland. I think the idea would be to allow them to have the opportunity to express what they could do with efficiencies to operate their department, what might require a little more money this year but would save money in the long run, et cetera. It's a gamble because I'm asking them to be responsible. In the next part of my presentation will be forecasting the revenue, and I'll explain why. So the safer mode would be a simple 2%. But the problem I have with that is that in some cases, the run rate of that department is higher than 2%. For example, if you add in contractual obligations of, for example, the school department and the change in enrollment, change in special education, their run rate's a little above 4%. So when you start talking to them about 2%, you start talking to them about what they can now do without. Now, I'm not saying that we can necessarily afford a 4% increase in the largest town budget, but I am saying that we need to really use common sense and not just a flat formula that forces them in, the round peg in the square hole. I'm asking them to come in and explain their needs, and then you get to determine the priorities in spending. And if we run over the number that we have, we'll have to go back to the departments and say, okay, we need X number back from you. So we'll need to have you refigure the budget and see where you can achieve some savings. For example, if you take the police department, their wages this year without calculating any COLA would be a 2.2% coming up in the next fiscal year. So you have already some inconsistencies if you start forcing a 2%. So I'm willing to do this any way this committee tells me to do it. I am suggesting that we try working with the department heads in an adult manner and work on a conservative approach to the budget, but allowing them to present their case.
Yep. I just wanted one point of clarification, and feel free for those on the committee, Dave, with your experience too. a little bit of a misnomer with the 2%. I know that tends to sometimes often be the number, but, the way, we've kind of gone through it the last couple of years especially, kind of with the revenue forecasting. And last year, we asked for 2 budgets. The number from the revenue forecast we felt came in close to close enough that we kind of did the old dart at the dartboard. We had 2% roughly, but real needs, secondly. So that was just, and years before that, it wasn't 2%, so 2%'s kind of been the
Go-to.
the number that people keep throwing out, although it hasn't necessarily always been the number, it just happens to have been the revenue cycle.
Yeah, I think some of that comes from the 2.5.
Sure,
So that's kind of what happens and where it goes up, but,
sometimes it's 0.
I'd like to, just ask, I think we need a little bit of a new approach.
Yeah.
I think everybody's in agreement with that. So as we sit down, is the plan to present a forecasted budget off of what was actuals versus voted at town meetings? Because I think that's important. So the documents we got today to close out FY19, it shows many areas where there was excess funding, which ends up going into free cash anyway, okay? So are we gonna be working in the old format of this is what was voted on town meeting last year, and let's build off of that 2.5%, or whatever we come up with?
And I think we can probably, I mean,
Right.
I agree with you 1,000%, not to budget it just because that's the number we always budget,
Okay.
right? So can we look and incorporate the actuals into our
Right, so
actual
we'd have
projections
to
and
look at what was
spreadsheets?
actually spent last year, and process is gonna, it looks like it's starting a little bit earlier this year, which is great, because come the January, February, March timeframe, we're gonna be able to forecast off of what the actuals are for the year, for the few months. Of course, taking into consideration, the snow budget and different things, and cyclical payments on stuff, but I just wanna make sure we keep an open mind as to if we start looking at actuals, so we're not, because the town in the past has been, I don't wanna say accused, but people have had the idea or thought that perhaps certain areas were overfunded, which would feed our free cash, of course, trying to play it safe. And the next year, we go to town meeting, and, well, that was budgeted last year. Yeah, but it was $75,000 over. We don't need that extra money. So I want to just make sure everybody's aware of that, that we use a comparison from last year's budget, finals, and a forecast from this year's as we go forward and deeper into the process. I think it's a great idea to
Well,
approach
we
the
can give you
departments this
the
way.
actual spending, we can give you the appropriation, the actual spending for 19.
Yep.
We can give you budget to date
Right.
for 20. We can provide that.
Yeah, we
That's
already
not a
have,
problem.
we
We'll
already
get
have a
that
good chunk of that.
on a regular update, so you'll see where you are. I tend not to penalize, if you go back to the theory under the Carter years, some of you are too young to remember this.
He went to the
with
hospital today, by the way, he fell.
He did, yeah.
Oh, really?
That was a couple, I think, yeah, a couple.
No, third time,
Oh, another one.
yeah.
Zero-based budgeting was the idea, so if you didn't spend it, you lost it. Well, all that created was a big rush at the end of the budget year to use it because they would lose it. So that's sort of a discredited theory, and I don't want to be in a situation, if somebody doesn't spend a number in their budget, yet, comes to the finance committee and says, well, it was an exception, or we didn't do this, and we will do this next year,
Right.
I don't want to penalize them for telling the truth.
Right, and I'm not talking about penalizing
Yeah.
them at all.
But I think past practices, especially, like, a lot of times, and I just saw this, it's just increase it every year by 2%. But if you
Right.
didn't spend that this year, not necessarily gonna cut it or take it away from your budget, but it doesn't mean it needs to be increased by
Fair enough.
2%.
And-
And I think it's just changing, like, the way that the departments are looking at it, and a lot of the departments maybe don't have a lot of experience in the budget process, and now, like, if we go approach it with a new, like, train and
And there's gotta be
train of
trust.
thought, then,
Right.
yeah.
To the point of,
think-
there's gotta be trust that, we're not gonna
All sincerity.
penalize and
Right,
take
we're
it
not out
away,
to
and
get
and we're not out to
anybody.
get anybody, right?
I just wanna make sure that it's out there on the table, and, I understand completely what you're saying, because even myself, if I have $50,000 budgeted for something and I don't spend it, it's because timing wasn't right, prices went up, something happened,
Right.
or I'm going a different direction, but I need it for this instead, the next year, it's there.
Right. We certainly want to give them the tools to do their job, and we want to be able to trust our department heads to come in and tell us the truth. My favorite story is when I was doing budgets, not in this community, I want to make that clear for the audience at home. I keep getting this fire department budget with $5,000 worth of hoses every year. So I'm walking through the fire department, looking around, and the chief says, "What are you looking for?" I said, "All these hoses. There's been $5,000 exactly of hoses for the last 6 years. So where are these hoses?" I mean, he sort of looks away from me and, you know, and then when I start digging through the records, we spent it on a server, we spent it on furniture, everything but $5,000 worth of hoses. I don't wanna institutionalize lying. I wanna create, if you need a server and you steal from this line to put it into the server line, I'm okay with that, if that's what you need to do. I just need to know what the historical trend is so that we can properly fund the department at a level that's achievable.
And that's because they needed $100,000 for a drying tower to dry the hoses. You didn't give it to them.
Well, is that, I have a question, so I'm new, right, obviously first meeting, but I know in my business, what we do a lot is they have key performance indicators, like how much does it cost to rent out a library book, to give out a library, how much does it cost to fight a fire, do they do that here?
No.
No,
Because
like
it's
how much
hard to
does it-
actually make that decision. We have an awful lot of rolling stock that waits for the fire. Okay, so,
Right.
you know, in a cost accounting sense, in an ongoing operation where you're selling product and buying product and stocking supplies, you know what your cost of goods sold is. Here, I'm sitting around with an awful lot of rolling stock waiting for your house fire.
Oh, yeah, I understood, but I'm just saying year to year, like
Yeah.
if you said
Year to
last
year, we
year
look at
was
that, but if you-
$5,000
You
a
know, if you were
fire.
to look at the, what I call the sit around and wait capital investment, it's staggering. And all it is literally the, you know,
Yeah.
a ladder, as you will hear from the fire chief, ladder truck is $1 million. So you don't run it enough times.
Is there really any buildings that need a ladder truck in the town?
Almost, under the new fire principles of how you put out a fire, every house fire is a ladder truck.
Really?
So,
And actually, the central school, as we learned last
Yeah.
year, central school.
but are you look at it from, well, the high school?
High school and central, yeah.
So we definitely would need it, but the new, ever since I'm gonna wait till the fire chief comes in and he can do a much better job explaining how to put out a fire than I can. But prior to the Worcester fire where we lost the firemen inside the building, the idea was to go into the structure and knock down the fire. Now the basic
Supper.
premise is to cut a hole in the roof and pour water down and stay out of the building unless there's a threat to human life.
Right.
So, every time you see a house fire, it's gonna be a ladder truck.
It's all insured, so let it burn.
And of course, if you think about it, in younger days, they would go in and knock down a kitchen fire, and, you know, you didn't have the damage. Now, when you get a fire, the house is toast anyway.
Right.
So, hits the insulation, they gotta rip it out, so, you know, the damage to a house from a house fire is far more severe if it happens at all.
Right.
So, there are certainly less house fires than there used to be. But thank goodness they turned into a EMS department, because that's where all the, you know, if you look at the call volume, that's
Well,
essentially where it's
yeah,
coming
how much
from.
does it cost for an EMS call?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're usually pretty good about telling us the volume of work they have to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fire
Yeah.
department.
You'll see in their
ambulance
presentations,
service.
they do a great job at kind of
How many
explaining it.
calls and
Yeah,
stuff like that. But
police did a phenomenal job on it, too.
there's other things that, when we get into the budget, we're gonna need to discuss. For example, a fire truck is a capital investment. A police cruiser is an operational expense. So you're running that police cruiser, not oddly enough, a lot of miles, but a lot of idle time. So a police cruiser is a very expendable item, and it rotates out on a 3-year basis. So generally speaking, I put the police cruisers into the operational budget. Now, we're gonna have some interesting arguments this year as we make this transition. One-time expenses are matched with one-time revenues. Capital budget, free cash. Operational expenses are matched by ongoing revenue, tax revenue. So I try to make sure that we actually literally segregate those expenses. Now, that's not always a perfect plan. Especially this year, when we look at the revenue number, it's not robust. So we may have to buy police cruisers out of the one-time revenue and put it into the capital plan. Also, it's a bit of a change because the town has always bought their police cars as capital. So we don't necessarily need to make that change in 1 year, but it's where I'm going. You know, a fire truck lasts 20 years. A police car, 3 years.
Is that gonna be the same theory for other departments as well, vehicles?
In many cases, the
So your
DPW a
fire-
little different because, you know, a grader and a pickup truck, not a pickup truck, a dump truck lasts a long time. So I want to
But we have
match
plenty of
the-
regular vehicles in the fleets
Right.
too, between
Yep.
fire and DPW.
Yep.
So it's not gonna be isolated too.
Nope. We'll look at that. And we'll look at the useful life expectancy of the vehicle. For example, the fire chief's car doesn't get the idle time a police car does, therefore lasts longer. So is it capital or is it operational? So we gotta actually work on how we wanna define that policy and work with capital about how they define that policy. So something to think about as we go forward of how we wanna categorize our expenses. Let's talk about the revenue number.
How much debt is dropping off this year?
Not enough. We got about $1 million coming off, not including the school debt. I don't include the school debt because it's a whole different kettle of fish, because you got the operational override, which is calculated to match that. We're carrying, our debt to equity ratio, if you will, if we use an, accounting term, is a little higher than I would like to see it. And part of the problem, as I explained to Laura at the last meeting, is I don't understand it, but last year we bonded $1 million at town meeting and then put $1 million in stabilization. So let me think about this. Stabilization is invested at, with its return at 2.36%, and we borrow money at 4%. Why did we do that? We should have taken that money and not borrowed the money. Right now, we have plenty of money in reserve beyond the 10% rule. So I'm not saying that we need to go on a spending spree. I'm saying we are comfortable with our reserves. We need to be careful with our debt. Simple that. Now, a certain amount of money, now this is gonna blow your mind if you've been used to budgeting in a corporate world or a personal sense. We're Yankees. We don't like debt. Debt is bad. But as Dave will tell you, a certain amount of debt capacity in the municipal budget is an absolute requirement. Because otherwise, the money that you use to pay for debt service gets sucked up in operational costs. And when you have to borrow money, you don't have any capacity to pay it back. So as a consequence, what you want to do is keep a certain amount of debt at all time. And when something drops off, you put something on. A fire truck drops off, you put a DPW truck on. So you're keeping a certain amount of debt going all of the time.
But then the taxes never go down, right?
Taxes never go down.
Right.
If you think that joining this committee, you're gonna make taxes go down,
I didn't
I
say
would
that.
like
I'm
to
just
sell you a
saying-
bridge in
No,
Brooklyn.
I didn't say that at all. I'm just saying that.
Best you can do is slow the rate of increase.
Mhm.
You can never go down.
Now,
It
how
could
about our,
eliminate the risk of a need for an override before reduction.
Right.
That's the only thing it can really do.
Correct.
but yet our audit report tells us that our debt is fine.
Yes, the debt is fine. However, one of the things I'd like to do
Actually,
within the
it almost
next.
said it could have been
Our
higher.
debt capacity is higher.
Yeah,
I mean, you can do more debt.
yeah.
I don't wanna do more debt, okay? I think we need to establish what's an acceptable level of debt and maintain a debt capacity, which we will probably look at after we set a budget. Because the debt level is sufficient right now, we don't have to worry about it. But when we start getting after the budget season and after we get through the issue of town meeting, the finance committee continues to meet and we start working on the structural items of what our financial policies, what our debt structure should look like going forward. And if I get my way, and we'll talk about this at a future date, the state allows the town now to do what's called the prudent investor rule, which allows us to leave the state's mandated ultra-safe investments that get us only 2.36% and move into the prudent investor rule. The town of Cohasset just passed that home rule petition, just got it, we're first town in the state to adopt the prudent investor rule, and they moved their funds and they're projecting a 7 to 9% return on their money. We have a lot of money in reserve. That would make a significant difference to a return on our investment. Now, here's the key. If I invest in what the state says to invest in, under the non-prudent investor rule, if you will, you're absolutely assured that your principal is 100% secure. You will never lose it. But your return on investment is 2.36%. Who among us would be happy with our 401 making only 2.36% in this environment and this economy? So the next step that I would produce for you guys is the prudent investor rule, where then the finance committee will look at how the money is invested, making recommendations to the Board of Selectmen and the treasurer collector about where we wanna go. So, and there are funds now being identified by the state that they will accept under the prudent investor rule. So we can start moving our return on investment up. Is it as risky as I put my, what's the term for, it when we put money in our 401 and I go with the risky investment but the higher rate of return?
Aggressive?
Aggressive? Okay, we won't do aggressive, because the risk if another 2008 comes along, we will not be happy. So we will pick a form of investment that we can live with, but gets us greater than 2.36%. So that'll be on the town meeting warrant.
Just, can we go back to debt capacity for a minute? A while ago, if I remember correctly, we were like this close to the cap.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened and what dropped off to expand that, do you know?
I don't.
We were really close to the cap.
But
Not-
I
not
read the
since I've
same
been on
thing
the
in the
board.
financial statement that she wrote.
Yeah.
They're telling, we have like 28% additional capacity in debt, and I cannot imagine putting up that much more money into debt. I mean, our operating budget's 54 million. The non-school debt is 50 million, not including our OPEB debt of 50 million. So enough. So of course, as you might remember, not long ago, they changed the rule about how our other post-employment benefits will be accounted. So this year is the first year that the OPEB liability shows as an actual liability and not as a footnote. So when I look at our debt-to-equity ratio, it's including that $50 million. So I'm not wild about seeing that number that high.
It's gonna show up for everybody, though,
It is.
right? So we're
Well,
gonna still
it
be,
isn't.
gonna still be in the
It
ballpark.
shows everybody in Massachusetts, or, we rate against Massachusetts cities and towns. But towns and cities in, let's say, pick a state, Missouri, Oklahoma, who don't give generous other post-employment benefits, and now they account for that, they show much better than we do. Now, so far it hasn't affected our credit rating, and in fact, when we come up with a plan for our OPEB, and I have a plan waiting for the Board of Selectmen to, bless it, the idea would be that we have a plan and the rating agencies will calm down. Right now, we have a $50 million liability with $10,000 in an account to offset it. If you were a banker, would you be happy with that reserve? So, and no plan to address that $50 million debt. We need a plan, so we're gonna address it. And in addition, I think because of our asset size, how responsible we are and conservative in our budgeting, I think that we could actually go for a credit re-rating. Right now, we're a AA community. I'd like to see us move into a AAA community. Can we do it? I don't know, but I'm certainly gonna try. It would save us money on, when we do borrow money, our interest rate comes down. So,
What's our pension liability?
50 million.
So we have 50 in pension and 50 in OPEB?
Oh, you got,
Or-
I'm sorry, the county pension
Yeah.
liability, I don't know off the
Okay.
top of my head, but I can find that number for you. But the OPEB liability is 50 million. Now, what we're doing to pay our liability, our outstanding liability with Plymouth County is we're doubling our payments, which was required starting, how many years ago was that, Dave? 5, 6 years ago?
It had to be at least that, yeah.
Where you doubled your payments until it's paid off. Now, that's paid off in 2026. So my recommendation, if I'm here in 2026, is you didn't have it, you won't miss it. We'll switch that payment over to the OPEB liability. We'll add it with a revenue source so that we can make an additional payment on top of that. And I think, based on the plan I submitted to the Board of Selectmen, we can polish off our liability by 2040. So I know that probably none of us will be sitting in this room in 2040. I don't plan to be. I hope I'm still above the surface, but we never know. The idea would be, it took a long time to create the problem. It isn't gonna go away paying off $50 million overnight. So, but I gotta have a plan, and the plan is to bury that debt by 2040. Now, once you create the trust account and you funded it, then you, A, can stop paying it, and B, you can start drawing back against the liability at that time to cover that cost. So you get sort of a double advantage once it's paid off.
How much are we paying on the Plymouth County?
2.3
A year,
extra.
extra.
So
So we're really paying 4.6?
Yeah. I'll get you exact numbers so that, we won't be playing in speculation. So and that paid off, and I can't remember if it's fiscal 2026 or actual 2026, but it's paid off in not too far away. I know that sounds weird when we start talking about 2026, but we will see that.
There's only 12 more weekends till Christmas.
Oh, you're a joy.
Thanks.
Now, talking about the revenue forecast. Last year, people got what they wanted in the budget. And nobody's ever happy entirely, so, but pretty much everybody got what they wanted. The revenue numbers were a little higher than I would have liked to see them, and we did not make them. So this year, I'm gonna give you revenue numbers that are what I consider to be conservative, but not ridiculously so. I think Rocco's comment was they were, tremendously cut projections. I'm gonna sort of do half tremendously cut. I need to make sure that the revenue numbers we achieve, okay? I don't mind creating free cash from excess revenue. I do have a little bit of a problem creating it deliberately by over budgeting, because that's not fair to the taxpayer. So we're gonna look at that. I would rather be conservative in my forecast and revenue, not have a deficit at the end of the year created because we inflated the revenues. So the revenue number that I'm gonna give you, and I have a preliminary forecast, but I will give you a much more up-to-date forecast at the next meeting, so that we know where we're coming, and that's the number we're gonna balance against. Now, the good news is, and I'm gonna be careful how I say this, the good news is there's a $3 million free cash number this year, which is more than double what it traditionally has been. And the reason for that is 3 years ago, we moved from Southeastern Massachusetts Healthcare to GIC. And we got back a bonus withdrawal of about $943,000. My predecessors put that in a fund and just left it there. The state came back and said, you can't do that. You need to declare that as free cash, and you need to appropriate it. If you wanna put it in stabilization, go right ahead, but it needs to be an act of town meeting. So that extra money is there. There's a couple of ideas about what to do with that. One of which is, if I have $3 million in free cash and I don't wanna borrow any more money this year, so take $1 million right off the top of that, so now I have $2 million. So I'm looking at maybe a surplus of about $700,000. We may pick one or two projects, we may take a certain amount of money and put it aside to buy down the health insurance premium. There is a case to be made that that was contributed by the employees long since, so there be a requirement to give some of it back to the employees that put it there. But of course, since we were in Southeast Healthcare for 27 years,
At least, yeah.
okay, going backwards in time and figuring out everybody, the state says I don't have to do that, but I may still have to provide a sum of money. We are looking at healthcare again. I've hired a healthcare consultant to look at our options. We're in GIC. It's not bad. It's not perfect. There are things that we can do to bring our liability in healthcare down a little bit, and yet, oddly enough, give a better benefit to our retirees. So we would save the town money, and we would save the retirees money. So we're gonna be talking about that at a future meeting. So I would probably like to take some of that money and put it in reserve, as I have a possibility how we could use that money to, A, make sure we don't have an uprising from the previous employees about that money, and B, that there is a benefit to the employees for healthcare, since that's where it came from. So, and so we'll be talking about what we do with free cash.
But only a certain portion of that came from the employees.
Right.
Because it was an 80-20 split, 20 and 80. Okay.
Yep, that's why I don't have to give it all to them. So, and besides, the problem is, it goes back 27 years. How do you determine what share belongs to who,
Yeah,
based on what
right.
loss record, so.
They're getting healthcare, that's what they paid for,
Hmm?
right?
They got, yeah, we're fine. And we're covering them in retirement,
So what else they want? Now they want extra money too?
so. So we'll be looking at that. Laura, what else did I mention that I wanted to? Laura takes notes when I speak to her.
Who audits the town? Who's the auditor?
We have a company out of,
Laurel, I think, is
Yeah,
it still
Laurel.
LMM?
yes, thank you,
That was a new company, what, a year ago?
No,
2 or 3 years, actually.
is it a new
Vanilla?
No,
company, or is it just a change?
Change of
in
name.
name, yeah, it's just a change.
Same part, they changed the name of the company.
Yeah.
So,
What's the name of it?
It's LMM, they're in,
LMM?
yeah, I think that's, they've had a few name changes, and that's,
I'll have that for you next meeting. In fact, I'll give you the financial statements, so you can
Oh,
read
that'd be good,
where
yeah.
we are.
they've been the auditors here for
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
some time.
I'm not, I mean, we'll put the audit out to bid this coming year and see where we go. It's, I like consistency. I'll give you the double-faced answer. I like a consistency in auditing firms, but every once in a while a change is necessary. Because the new broom suite's clean, they find things the other ones didn't, they look at things with a different set of eyes, so it's not always a good thing to continue with the same firm. But I'm two-faced about that because it depends upon what I think the efficiency of the auditors is. And having been an accountant in a previous life, I know what I'm doing. So,
A lot of efficiencies, that's for sure.
okay. Good. Also,
expertise here if you
I used-
need to have
that's
it.
right.
I used to work for the firm that audited the town.
Thank you.
It
We're
was a different
also,
name when I worked there.
I'm gonna bring you some ideas for changing the warrant a little bit. It is the selectmen's warrant, but essentially it's your budget. So,
Yeah.
we're gonna be looking at making the audit warrant just a little bit more clearer to an average reader, so that somebody that's not a accountant can look through this and understand what the heck we're doing.
But I think, yeah, I've read that. And one thing I get confused about, it's like the health insurance gets glommed into one bucket. So you really don't know like how much the fire department really costs, or the police department, or the library, because those health costs are just over
What,
here.
you
It's a
think
way
we
to,
don't do that deliberately? What's wrong with you?
crazy, I guess, I don't know.
But I can break out any number you wanna see.
But I mean, I think people would, that would give you the true cost of like how much the police department costs,
Right.
right?
And as we go, as you'll see when we get into it, we start having more of those merge costs, right? Because we're centralizing and we're being more efficient with our facilities cost and a lot of our DPW auto, our IT. So we're starting to do much more of that and it becomes even more
We
complicated.
do our fleet maintenance now in-house, so sometimes it is difficult to separate the true cost. Not impossible. There's, and David will correct me, there's a Form 1 that's done for the school to create the per pupil expenditure. And their requirement is to determine what it really costs to operate that school. The health insurance costs, what the electricity costs, what the DPW's contribution costs. And so the form is actually compiled not by the auditor or the accountant, it's compiled by the school business manager. So we had to certify the Form 1, I think about my third, fourth day here. So I wasn't too sure. And in going back through some of that, we're going to be looking at that Form 1 just a little more critically next year.
Yeah.
Because I know we're on camera, and I'm sure I'm going to hear about this when I say it, but I don't believe our PPE is low. I believe our reporting is. So, next September.
Probably agree with you.
Okay, next September, I will have, whether that's true or false.
And we have asked a lot of those same questions, and when we have our department presentations, and a perfect example, as Brian mentioned, is DPW. As we've gone central facilities, and a lot of the work that normally might have been subbed out now gets done actually by our DPW department. So it is incredibly important, probably, and much more difficult to kind of parse some of that out, but the departments typically do a very good job of kind of, not just for our benefit, But for that exact reason, we've, really tried to make them kind of
Well,
segregated in their budget.
Effective this year, when the DPW does a job with the school, a work order is created, and it's not charged back, because they'll never pay it, but it's going to be accounted for, so when they do Form 1, that PPE number will be correct.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. The sewer isn't charged to the school, yet the largest customer is the school.
Yeah, why wouldn't they charge the school?
Sewer or water. Water wasn't charged either.
Right. So that is all gonna go back into the calculation of Form 1. So again, PPE isn't low, it's just reported low. So, and I'm sorry, Liz. So,
Well, it's not ill intent, we want to be accurate.
We wanna be
In what
accurate.
we're talking about and what we're budgeting and the numbers across the
Yeah,
board.
this is an opportunity
yeah.
to really put the cards on the table. People have asked for transparency, the Board of Selectmen want transparency, the voters want transparency. I agree with you 100% on the reporting component, because many, many times we sat down, even when I was on the board, and we said, this number's not right. There was one, John Margie was one of the folks who would say, you gotta include this, we gotta include this, we gotta include that. And when we did that, the numbers came up. And, because we were perplexed when I was on the board to say, why is it so low? And you take this, and you do simple math, it doesn't come out that way. So, it's great. Here we go, back to the auditing firm, and now we have somebody with new eyes looking at it. There we
Yeah,
go.
and similarly, we want to make sure that the DPW is reported appropriately too. So
Right.
it goes both ways, right? It's not just moving and saying, and making
No,
sure our
yeah.
PPE
What are you
is
guys doing
appropriate.
all day?
Right, exactly. It's kind
A
of,
lot of work at the school.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
exactly. So it's making sure that every department
I'm
is
actually sort of
is
really
accounted
impressed
for.
with the DPW. And if you haven't been
Yeah,
down there,
good.
considering what they have to work with and how they do it and how effective they are, you should spend some time there. It's pretty impressive.
I agree with you.
So,
Jen and I spent a lot of time down there last year.
so in any event, that's where we are. I guess the rest, I've basically spread the word in the department heads at this moment. We will cover our obligations under our collective bargaining agreements, but don't look for a lot of extra money. It's that simple. So anybody who comes in with, fantasy is gonna have a problem, because we don't have it.
Well, what are your thoughts on a go-forward basis? I mean, looking back over the past few years, a lot of these collective bargain, they're all over 2%.
Yeah.
They're somewhere between 2 and 2.5%.
Yeah.
Some of the,
It's very difficult in coming from the private sector and then jumping to the public sector. There were years when I was in the private sector, I didn't get a raise for years. So, probably because I wasn't effective, so, probably my fault. Under collective bargaining, depending upon the number of steps that you have in the contract every year, just for consuming oxygen, you got a bump. Can be anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3%, depending upon the contract and which department it is. Then, like, for example, in the schools, if you go from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, which you have to do in 3 years, you change lanes. So that's an increase, let alone the cost of living adjustment. So,
And longevity. and
Longevity.
da-
well, I have a
Yeah.
philosophical problem. What's a step? You were here another year.
Yep.
right.
What's longevity?
Same
You were
thing.
here 5 years. What's
Right.
the difference? You got paid for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a big fan of longevity, and I know that my unions are watching, so, the fact of the matter is, though, those are things that are built in. We are loading up all the union contracts onto the website. They're all accessible. They all can be read. Please familiarize yourself with them. We are in the process of negotiating the DPW, the Patrolmen's Union, the Superior Officers Union, and starting in June again, we'll be doing the fire contract.
Well, when they're loaded up on the website, give the chief a heads up, because the ambulance is gonna be out quite often when people at home read these contracts.
Yes.
They're there.
Who negotiates them for the town? Is that your thing?
Yes.
But I guess, if these contracts continue to go up and the revenue base of the town is only-
Limited.
is limited.
Yep.
I'm looking at this from a 5, 7, 10-year perspective. It's only sustainable.
Your
for so
lines are gonna
long.
start going like this, right?
Okay, so,
Maybe.
yes. However, I've been doing municipal finance for 20 years, and in the first 3 years, I told my board that it wasn't sustainable. We're still here. So, you know, you look at it.
Well, you know, and I think for the committee too, and when you're a layperson, never mind even on the committee, and you start hearing, you know, this contract is going up by fill in the blank, and whether it's a department head, a chief, or whatever, this is going up, and let's just throw a number out there, and let's just say it's 5.5%. And then in the next breath you hear, but we're so poor we can't buy bullets or fire hoses or
getcha.
whatever it is. And that becomes a struggle, because again, to Dan's point, there's gotta be.
A
and
day
yes,
of reckoning.
There's gotta be a day of reckoning. And
And it
private
comes.
sector to municipality, it doesn't really matter. The money, still, it all still happens the same way.
We had situations here one year where all the unions, except for one, took a 0%. And then after everybody took a 0%, they kinda took a 0%, except they got it at the end of the year, the increase instead. So there is some balance that takes place. And remember, you have people and some of the largest, somebody retires at 90,000, they hire somebody at 45,000 or whatever. So but it does eventually catch up with you.
Well, and then one of the problems is that we live in a very competitive world. Let's take
That's another.
Yeah,
a police officer.
yeah.
Police officer
Industry's
quits
changing.
or transfers to another department, and I have to hire another police officer, if I can find one. I have to outfit that man, buy him a bulletproof vest, put him in a cruiser, and send him to
Academy.
the academy for 6 months. Well, I'm paying him to go, and I pay his tuition to go. And while he's there, I backfill the shift he would have been working at overtime. So every time I have to send a police officer to the academy, it's costing me over $30,000. So if I can slow down the attrition by making sure that we stay competitive against our peer communities, I'm going to do that. Because I can save money by not having the attrition. So I don't want to lose a police officer for a small difference in wage. Will I lose a police officer if the police officer comes to me and says, you know, I can go to Boston and I can work for Boston PD and I can make X more $100? You win.
Right.
Set
You know,
traffic.
This is East Bridgewater.
You know, you want to go to Brockton, you want to go to Taunton, you probably can make more. You want to stay in a small town, any one of the Bridgewaters, we're competitive, and we want to stay competitive. So consequently, I can't stop the laws of economics at the border of East Bridgewater. I need to stay competitive. Right now, for example, and I use this example liberally with my unions, if I put a sign up out in front of Town Hall and say, now hiring clerical workers, I'll run out of paper for the applications. If I put a sign up that says, wanted, DPW employee must have CDL, must have a hoister's license, if I get one guy, I'll be thrilled. Okay, so I gotta pay. In this environment right now with the construction world being so hot, in the olden days, when I was, 20 years younger, people went to work for the town because you had an absolute stable job that lasts forever, and you got a good retirement. Yeah, you didn't make a lot of money in your working life. Well, now it's sort of, it isn't as stable as it used to be, but it is stable. Okay, you're getting decent money. You probably could make more money in the private sector, but you'd be opening yourself up to the vagaries of the economy, especially in construction, which is where I'm competing for a DPW worker. And then lastly, our benefits now equal what you get in the private sector. So
What's the difference?
it isn't as advantageous to work for the town as it used to be, with the exception that I get every crazy holiday off.
And Friday
Oh, they
afternoons.
got a pension, right? They got a pension in private sector.
Admittedly, but
Yeah.
here's the thing.
No pension in private sector.
There, yes and no. For
Maybe
example,
for
if I was in
Eversource.
private sector, I'd have a 401.
Yeah.
Here,
401
I
is
don't
different.
get the 401 and I don't get Social
Social
Security.
Security is what makes, yeah.
And I contribute 7 plus 2 to my retirement. So I'm participating in my retirement.
Right.
So,
Yep.
it's
It's just different.
different.
Yeah.
It's,
If you live to be 100, then you make out like a bandit.
it would
Right.
be great. But what I would really like is the option
Yeah.
to opt out and maybe pay Social Security.
Yeah. And have a
I
401k.
don't even have that option. So you know, and.
Is that something we could do as
There
a
is,
town?
no, we can't because of the state law. However, we can change some of the requirements so we don't become eligible for other post-employment benefits without, one, retiring from this town as opposed to just simply retiring from a municipality and then coming back to me for that retirement, or saying you have to do at least 10 years of service here before you're eligible for the retirement from here. So there are things that we can do. We'd have to do some of this stuff by home rule petition, but we need to take a look someday at how we're doing the OPEB accrual. And there are some things that we can do. We can even opt out, meaning we're not gonna give retirements and, other post-employment benefits in retirement. We'll probably not succeed at that, but you could, or you could change the contribution. So there are things that we could, do. One of the first things that we need to do, and I'm off the record here, I mean, I'm worried about time. How far am I going?
We, probably another couple minutes.
Okay. I want to move the way we're investing our OPEB money to the state's funds. That will increase the rate of return, which will in turn decrease the liability. So if I move from the Bartholomew Fund to the state's retirement fund for OPEB, if you will, I can knock probably 20 to 30%, depending upon the rate of return, right off that 50 million bucks. So that's gonna be on the town meeting warrant to move that money. And I don't think I'll have any difficulty getting that one passed through town meeting, as it will save a ton of money. Plus, I'm making the pitch that we need to be looking at the meals tax. Now, I know that, no one likes more taxes, no one. But I need to make a payment to OPEB of about $250,000 a year. Where do you want me to take that money from? So by adopting a meals tax, which is 0.75%. So if you go to Dunkin' Donuts and you buy that coffee, you'll pay 2 cents.
We're well-versed in the meals tax. We've been, this committee's been trying to push it for,
So I think you
2
should go
years
for
now.
the meals tax. And plus
2
the
years.
fact you're paying it in everybody else's community.
that's right,
Gonna say it's not
Why are
gonna
you
stop
giving
We are the
everybody a
only
free
one.
ride? Right.
in this area.
And I think you'd be appalled if I told you which restaurant here, I think I told you
Yes,
this.
you told me, but I also wanted to tell you what you estimated the meals tax revenue to come in at.
I estimated it no less than 200,000. That was based off of
Much more than we initially
2016.
Well, yeah, because it would
anticipated.
apply to like our wedding venues as well, right? I mean, we think,
Yep.
first we think restaurants in town, you're like, well, we don't have a lot, but then you also have the venues.
Actually, this is a little cool. You know where the most money will come from in the meals tax?
The Villa?
Dunkin'
Mockingbird?
Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts?
Laura's bathroom right here, we'll pay it all.
Yeah, just so that you know,
Funded West
these numbers
Bridgewater
are,
on my way to work.
you can see this number in the Department of Revenue. Post the numbers that you get, each community gets in the meals tax. Well, that's the state meals tax. So all you have to do is do the math for the extra 0.75%, and you know exactly what you're getting. The last complete year that they posted, however, was 2016. So my numbers are based off 2016 numbers. I think I'm being conservative.
Yeah.
So, if I got this, if you will, we've always had this debt, but now I gotta make some kind of arrangements for this. I need a source of revenue. This is painless, and it will be mostly paid by people driving up 18, stopping at Dunkin' Donuts.
Good idea.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we'll be very happy the day it passes.
Cumberland Farms is only 99 cents.
So
only
Michelle
get a
gave, Michelle would give, and every time we had this discussion, Michelle would give the Cumberland Farms,
Why
because
do
she's
you-
a Cumberland Farm, and she goes, I pay at Whitman when I stop at, wherever she stops,
Does that,
101.
does that have to be collected by the town, or does the state?
No, the state just collects it
sweeps
and hands it over to the town.
So that is,
It's money on the table.
yeah, so operating costs.
Can't you do that with fuel also? Isn't there a,
Not yet.
I think that,
We're not big enough. Okay, I can't do an occupancy tax yet. Okay, so we don't have a hotel really to speak of, so, but we could go after the B&Bs and the Airbnbs and all that kind of stuff, but we're.
It's high
I don't
demand in
think
these
we-
gonna
days.
say,
Why
too.
not Airbnbs? Like, I'll rent out my
I
house,
know,
but
you
if
don't
one
like
wants to
that,
stay there,
I don't.
we'll try it, we'll try it.
I don't know how many Airbnbs we have,
You can find out, though, right?
yeah,
I
but
don't
the
know that we
state's
have
now
many.
gonna tax the Airbnbs, and we'll find out.
Yeah,
So-
interesting. So, let's mix up the agenda items, and let's just talk schedule a little bit. I'm gonna hand out a
Please.
draft of your schedule. sticking. You know it, but if you wanna look at it too.
The Board of Selectmen has adopted this.
They have, okay, perfect. So, this is, the recommended timeline that, Brian's been working with the board on. You know, although it states a little early, I've kind of tried to bump it up a little bit to kind of the scheduling that we've been using over the last couple of years. It's really not much different, which is great. Probably gets a little more aggressive, but, I think we probably wanna, and I printed out one of my old ones just to kind of walk it through. But do you wanna just kind of quickly go through?
Sure, we're
Thoughts
gonna
on it?
ask for the budgets by December 15th from the departments, and in all sincerity, you'll get, 90% of them on time. You will not get the schools on time. It's just not under state law, I can demand of the schools a budget on December 30th. It's just not fair. So, having come from the school side, I understand. So, the school deadline that I've discussed with them is the week after February school vacation, which is more logical. One of the things that particularly this year will be a challenge is if the state's educational reform of how they do the Chapter 70 money actually passes, there could be substantially more money. I want you to pay very close attention to that, because the Town Managers Association says that East Bridgewater will get between $220,000 and $250,000 more. But the Mass Association of School Committees says we'll get $650,000 more. Who the heck is right? And why is there such a difference?
Such a discrepancy.
So, the schools right now are giddy with the idea that it's $650, and I'm pessimistic with the idea that it's only $200. So, and until that passes, you can't count on it. So, because the world could change between now and then. They could also change, and this is what bothers me, they could also change the way the foundation budget is calculated and demand of the communities a greater participation. So maybe the difference between the number coming from the managers and the number coming from the school association is that change in the foundation budget. So I'm nervous. So, because they're not gonna give me an exemption from 2.5. So we'll have to wait for seeing that one to come out. I will not use a projection until it's law. That's one. So the school committee, or the school committee's budget doesn't have to be here until the week after February school vacation. And I think you'll schedule a joint meeting. Usually, we'll discuss this with you and tell me what you wanna do, but my recommendation is, since the Board of Selectmen will wanna hear it, we do a joint meeting between the three boards, school committee, finance committee, and Board of Selectmen, and they come and do the dog and pony show and tell us their budget, with all three boards in attendance. So, see how close we can work that out.
But you're recommending that just for the school, a joint?
Just for the school. Everybody else, I need a budget by December 15th.
But I'm talking about just doing a joint.
Yeah, the joint, no, I don't need to
Presentation.
do joint meeting otherwise. The school being a large percentage of our budget, it needs a fair amount of hearing and a fair amount of attention. So we probably do that with the three boards together. That's a bit of a change from,
Well, I think it's, the board, the board, as of last year, we talked about it quite a bit, about doing more with the Board of Selectmen specifically, because it felt like it was, inefficient to have everybody back and forth, and we felt again that it was, if we're having the financial discussions, wouldn't it be beneficial for everybody to be part of the discussion? So that was something we felt strongly about, and maybe for, maybe more of the major departments, not necessarily every department. I don't know how I feel about just, I get it from it being the biggest, but I don't
Well,
know.
they have their own
I suppose
committee,
we
right?
can-
They have their own committee, like there's no police committee or fire committee, right?
Right.
it's Selectmen.
Right, so,
Maybe the
Everybody has a
police and
committee.
fire give significant budget presentations, it would be good for.
I'll let that one go chairman to chairman
yeah,
and
Well,
let you decide how
yeah.
you want to do that.
I'm fine. I guess my concern is we're looking to have, by the end of February, have all of the presentations done.
Yes.
So the school's budget not even getting to us until the end of the third week of February gives us very, very little time from processing perspective. That's a concern.
Last year were they March? We were in March.
It got pushed.
because-
But we didn't even, yeah, and we couldn't do the presentation until much
one
later,
thing
so
I'm-
again,
Immovable on is we are having town meeting on May 11th.
yeah.
And come hell or high water, their budget has to be vetted by that time. And I will not postpone town meeting, because I need a budget in place.
So let's go through the rest of just kind of
Sure.
looking at, 'cause I
So,
wanted to make sure I understood.
budget's in by the end of December. January and February, Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen do budget hearings. They can be joint or they can be separate. But the Board of Selectmen will do budget hearings on their departments, okay?
Mhm.
And then, on February 3rd, the Board of Selectmen will open the town meeting warrant for the submission of articles. On March 2nd, they will close the town meeting warrant, and then the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen, if they so choose, can hold hearings. The Finance Committee can hear and can express an opinion on any article before town meeting. Traditionally, you've reserved your opinions for articles that had financial impact. However, I want to let you know that you have every right to make a comment on every article.
Okay.
So, and that's up to you.
Not required, so we don't necessarily need a formal vote, but we certainly can.
You can look at the articles that are submitted, then you can decide what you want to do hearings on
Okay.
as a committee. Then in March, we're doing the hearings, and then I put in the town elections, April 11, just for your reference. The warrant goes to press on April 10th. I like a month to get the warrant through press. Probably don't need it, but every once in a while, something doesn't come together quite right, or I'm waiting for a legal opinion on an article or a motion, so I allow myself that month, so that we're not panicking to get the thing out the door.
So with this, we'd be meeting with all our departments in the next less than 2 months, right, to get. So that would be
Yeah, I mean, we'd ideally want to be meeting with them before their presentation, so before January 1st.
Well, and probably before they submit their budget too, right? Because what's the point of meeting with
Right.
them if they've submitted a budget?
Yeah,
But,
ideally.
I mean, not
Um,
that there's no point, but the point, I
Yeah.
think,
They
is
submit
to
a
meet
budget,
before.
you review it. When they come in for a presentation, then you can have a discussion about their budget. They'll make a presentation, then you have a discussion about their budget. Some budgets will take a long time, police, fire, DPW.
They're actually
Um,
probably the more efficient
They're
of them.
more organized.
Yeah.
Some budgets, like veterans officer, are 5 minutes.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and in a weird sense, nothing productive happens after 9 o'clock. So I'm gonna recommend to the chairman, and it's her decision, but don't let the hearings go beyond 9, because you'll get
Oh, we
nothing
don't.
done. You know, and then you'll burn us out, and we won't wanna come.
So, you have a couple items that are backwards than how we've historically, I think, done them.
Sure.
So moderators meeting, we've typically done that joint meeting prior to them closing the warrants. So you're flipping it a little, because usually sometimes stuff will happen in that moderators meeting.
Is that like
That's
the
the
week
joint meeting we
before?
do. We've typically done it,
I keep the
couple weeks
moderator
before.
informed. He starts seeing drafts of the warrant
Yeah.
the same time you do, so it's not a surprise.
Yeah.
In other words, I don't wait until the warrant is closed before I do a draft. As warrant articles come in, I update
Yeah.
the draft. And so you'll see this, and he will see this coming forward. So if he's got an issue, he'll, be on the phone sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And I do need to still contact him and have a discussion with him about how to do this, how he wants to do it. But generally speaking, the formulation of the articles is the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen, not the moderator. So, I
Don't
can
they just
flip it.
usually review with the moderator that this needs 2/3 vote, this and
yeah,
that,
it's
stuff like that?
typically, every once in a while, it's like something wonky will come up, but it's pretty routine. It's
And
just,
now,
it's
well,
just
the moderator
flipped on
wants to know
tip,
Who's making the motion?
who's making the
You know,
motion?
what's the
Do we
required
need a
vote?
2/3? Yep,
Right, which
Yep.
I usually write out in a master book and say, okay, turn the page, there you go.
yeah.
Who's making the motion? I give the town clerk the book, she sends out we have the moderators meeting, she hands it to whoever says I'm making the motion. Solve the problem.
Yeah, okay.
So, should be reasonably done.
Yep.
And by the way, at your request, we have set up the private access on the finance committee.
Oh, good.
So if you go to, what I'll need, by the way, at some point is get everybody's email again.
Yeah.
So we can give you an access code. You go to the town's website, you go to finance committee, and there's a, finance committee member access. Click it, and there's the drive, and everything will be there.
That's great.
This has been like a bugaboo of mine for a while. So and we'll figure this out as we kind of go through our clunkiness, with our new group. But once we get access, everybody's set up, I'll start to eliminate. I hate paper. I mean, I like a little bit of paper to write on. I do love paper, actually, is what it comes down to. But what I can't stand is when the budgets start coming in and we start getting,
stacked.
literally you come out of the year
And
with a
you're
stack of paper like
flipping,
that.
you're
And
I don't know
it's,
which one I'm supposed
and
to
everyone's
be
like,
at.
what version are we on? Now, a few other things that Brian and I have talked about, not for this year, probably going forward, is to try and make another run at technology for the committee. So some upgrades to the committee, hopefully, that we might be able to accomplish. So the shared drive is step one, so everyone can access it from home. Whether or not you want to bring a laptop with you is on your own, whether or not you want to do that. Anything important, we will provide paper copies if it's important.
Well, the nice part of it is, I don't have to, print your own copies.
Yep.
I'll bring one or two in case somebody forgets or coming from work and hadn't stopped at home, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'll have one or two printed copies so that you can do it. Other than that,
Yeah.
you're on your own.
Yeah, we're really gonna try and be a little more efficient. Version control, the whole 9 yards of kind of who's looking at what. And then we'll try to attempt to make a run at some technology for the committee. We'll see how that goes.
Well, let's see if you approve your own budget.
We will try to, it's not a capital item, so, we'll look at maybe some tweaks to our budget next
Is
year.
there like a template that each department gets, like a spreadsheet? And they kind of fill it in and add whatever
Yeah.
else they want to add?
Yeah. So those are some good
And
things.
some departments will come in that night and say, here's my budget, and that will be your first viewing of
First
it.
time.
Oh,
we
no,
see
it won't be, because we
request it
we
beforehand.
go to them, and we do our sit-down meetings with them, which we'll
hate
talk
that.
about. No,
Okay.
no, we'd like to digest way in advance.
Yeah, I don't think we had anyone do that,
No,
right?
no,
Thank
we've
goodness.
never, in the couple of years I've been here, we've been very lucky, so,
We do
so,
see a lot of variation between, I know, like you asked if there's kind of a form, my answer would have been no, that
Oh.
each
There's a form that I
department,
There's-
distribute,
yeah.
whether they use it or not.
every department I think I saw.
When they did
was
their
a different,
presentation, yeah.
form that we get, so it was a little bit,
But
you
the
know,
spreadsheets that go in,
right, we don't see
to-
those, or
yeah,
we didn't see
those
those.
were fairly consistent.
Right.
Okay, we'll
What
work
we
on
see
that.
is inconsistent.
Yeah. But to be fair, they just started kind of doing this presentation
Yeah,
and stuff, so
right.
they're all,
I am not, however,
Learning
going to
curve.
produce anything in a warrant that looks like this.
You have to give everyone a magnifying glass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna give you a budget that shows every department, it's gonna salaries and expenses. If you want to blow that out, we'll have a separate printout of every department by every line, but I'm not putting that in the warrant. That is an invitation for deliberate confusing of the voter. So we need to, we need to give them the information, and the information is available. But in the warrant, we're gonna limit it to, salary, expense, and the school is one line. Just one line.
how do you think that'll go over?
Mhm.
Yeah, you
As
answered
long
my
as- yeah, but
question.
as long as people have
Have the
access
access
to
to
the other
it,
piece.
yeah,
Yep.
because they
You
are
don't
very
need it
used
all
to the
printed out
detail.
in the article and stuff, but
No.
we'll have
Yeah.
questions, because
Have a lot
if
of
there's an
copies.
X amount of an increase to go over, where is it?
And they'll also, I just think that there would be this natural, everybody's about transparent. Right, it's that natural suspicion
I'm
too.
trying to produce a
Lot of money.
warrant that's much more, explicit about what it is we're doing and how we're doing it. And then, so the warrant itself will be easily digestible. If you say, gee, what is the police department's budget for training and education? Then we can pull an exploded budget and here you go. But rather than, spending all that paper for the one or two people who have a question, I want it available. It'll be on the website. Gonna be there. We'll have printouts at town meeting for anybody who wants one. But for the warrant, no.
Keep it clean.
So one of the next things that I'll work on is a little bit more of a blown-out schedule for us specifically that kind of matches up to this. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the agenda about meeting cadence, but I'd like to, last year was awful. There's no other way to say it. Last year was awful, and it got, because of the chaos that happened, it made us sticking to any type of a schedule impossible, and it just got confusing. So I'm a firm believer of, let's get it all laid out now, as much as we can, and then, we know exactly what we have to do on what days to meet the deadlines.
Okay, I've
for
talked
Brian.
enough
So
on you now.
we'll do that. Great, thank you. Any questions for Brian before we move on?
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to it. You know what? I love budget, I love this part of the budget season. And for anybody coming in late, let me know. I'll get some cheese crackers for you, and we'll leave them in the cabinet, and so if somebody's hungry, they can eat, so.
Do we give them a spreadsheet type format? I don't know what kind of a budget operating system we have, where they just populate on that spreadsheet?
They can?
They actually, I think
Can you make them actually do it or not?
I think they
Yeah.
actually maintain those own spreadsheets, because they have the historical year
think
after year after
certain
year. And I
departments are
think they're
better.
just kind of,
I mean, what's the
going the
carrot and
next
the
year,
stick
call
to
them
say like,
over.
look, here's the thing, fill it out, and they say,
So,
nah.
to the point of
Well,
adding
I think
actuals and all of
the
that,
fire
to
and
it, that would be
police
an awesome
and
idea.
DPW
Yeah,
budgets.
we should
sounds
have,
great.
My spreadsheet I give out.
I'll share with you some
Doesn't
things
matter, it's not the uniform.
We should look
Well, we
at
put it
and
into
consider.
that format.
And to Melanie's point,
we'll
at some
take what they
point,
give
maybe
me and
we'll
I'll
get
put
to
it into that
a little more
format.
That's extra
sophistication
work
when
for
we're
you.
actually using the
Well,
the
especially
software
they're making the
software
presentation, I like the way.
more
they do it.
efficiently too.
An
Oh, yeah,
easy
you'd
way
be
to,
familiar with it,
it'd
yeah.
be an easy way to see actuals and
All right.
year to date.
One of the other things before I forget for the new members, in thinking about, I don't have to worry about as much about Dave because he's been on the finance committee before. Just trying to think of any other materials that we can start putting together for you. So I'll start to kind of think about it. We'll try to get you some copies of last year's. We'll get you the books, because the warrant book is like the Bible. John Margie said, get your orange book and always have it with you, and I don't have it with me today. I totally failed. But we'll try to come up with a list of questions. If there's anything you think of that you can't find that you need access to, once I get access to the share drive, I'll move a lot of last year's files into that as well, because that's helpful from a historic perspective. But if you think of anything that you can think of, or if anybody else thinks of anything that we can give them, that will do that definitely. All right, next item is committee structure. So what we had done given that we had a new town administrator coming in, and what we came out of, when we met at the beginning of this year, we actually started the committee structure work, but we kind of only took it one step. We felt it was important for the committee to have a chair going into the year early, given we had a new town administrator. So we did move forward, and the committee did vote for me to become chair, but we decided it would be prudent to kind of hold off on the rest of the committee structure until we knew we had a full committee in place. So we do want to just have we have two other positions that we held off on, which would be the vice chair and the clerk's position. I also had some conversation with Brian, which I don't know if we can act on this year, but the clerkship and the minute taking, we're still gonna poke around of potentially some ideas of maybe getting some help. I don't know if it's anything we can do this year with that, but we'll.
I think you should.
I think we should too. I think we'll have to talk options of what it would potentially mean, but we'll still officially need a clerk, but I'm hoping we can lessen the burden, because
It's a lot of work.
I've done it for 2 years, I can attest to that.
I know,
And
I saw
before
Sterling.
Crystal did it
Bad
before.
enough. Clerk is a lot of
Can
work.
you record
Clerk-
the meeting and just text to speech it?
Okay, well, in a perfect environment, you'd have an employee
Yeah.
here to do the minutes and to do the arrangements. Laura would say, I want the police, fire, and such on this night, and that employee would book them. Okay, and that's their job.
Right.
And you don't have to pay all outdoors, but you are gonna pay some money, so you need some clerical assistance.
Right.
So I can post the job in town hall and see if a member of the staff wants the extra money. You're really only talking a period of January through May,
Yeah,
and,
so
it's not a lot of heavy lifting. You're out of work by 9, you're entertained, and you're part of the budget process, so some people might like it.
Yeah.
So it can be done, and then that creates an internal person who just picks up and dials the extension number as opposed to, okay, now what's his number? You know, and works with the chairman
it's
about
pri-
setting the schedule.
As opposed to me trying to do it, which, my
And
scheduling
I can
skills
also,
aren't
you
that
know, be
great.
delighted to use my staff to help you in any way. The minutes are another issue, because, you know, yes, I can record the meeting, but now I'm paying somebody to sit there and watch the meeting as opposed to attend it,
That's him, isn't it?
yeah, so.
Isn't that guy over there doing that?
He's just recording.
He's recording it,
Okay.
that's
so-
his job, but that ends it, he doesn't transcribe it.
So, so basically, we need to vote these two positions, so vice chair and clerk. So we'll start with vice chair, I guess. I know of one member that is interested. Dan has expressed an interest.
I'll
Um,
do it.
And then, I don't know if anybody else has expressed an interest, but Dan already has expressed that. I don't see any hands jumping up. If there isn't any additional interest, I would probably entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
Did nominate,
Oh.
nominate Dave.
Second the motion?
Okay, wait a minute. We'll go with Kevin as the, okay. Kevin and Joe second. Okay, so motion to have Dan be vice chair. Any further discussion? Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yes, yeah, perfect. And then we have clerk. So do we have any interested parties who would like to be the clerk? I will stress that I did it for 2 years.
Is there some kind of rule where if you've done it, you don't have to do it? 'Cause that's what
Yeah,
I was
Yeah,
myself.
I would say yes.
You have experience?
Done it, you have.
She did it for 2 years before
Listen, no,
me.
but I was
I'll
like the
do it.
big X. I got like, it was just not.
She used to get,
I got,
well, when Dina was Dina was tough.
it was tough. She's a tough cookie.
If you guys go easy on me, I'll do it if no one else wants.
Either that, or we could do a vice chair / clerk.
Dan withdraws.
Yes, I would.
Melanie has very graciously. I will say, though,
We usually make the new member.
they do usually make the
got
new
out of
members
it
do
last
it.
You did get out
I'm
of it
pretty
last
sure
year.
they waited till meeting one and said, oh, by the way, Laura. I don't think there was any asking.
Oh, and the clerk writes the warrant, right?
Yeah. God, thank God, no.
You don't want that?
It's not paid yet. You should say that. It's not a paid
It's
position.
still not a paid position. That being said, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know as we get a little closer, there's potential for you to miss a meeting or two.
And I'm trying to think, last year, I
think-
feel like it only was a meeting
was-
or two.
it
And
was
one
only-
I
I
had
think
the
it was-
flu.
It was only a couple, it was only a couple, absolutely. Given,
We haven't
But,
resolved the
So-
secretary position by that time. I will back her up.
you heard it here, folks. But I would, my recommendation
I
is,
definitely do my,
Yes.
I do my best,
yes,
obviously.
absolutely. And
then
what we did in the past is if the
someone
clerk
has
wasn't, somebody would
helped
step up
out,
and, with
that-
minutes, yeah.
We'll do this one.
That-
So I'll take that and I'll have one of the people in my office do the minutes for this meeting. You don't have to worry about it.
For this one here? Oh, thank you. Is that? I'm like, I don't know how important
Oh,
what I wrote down
Well, it's
is,
okay.
but-
I couldn't even handle it with
I've
my
been
chicken
taking
scratch.
notes.
I've been writing it down too. All right, so I will entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second?
Motion for Melanie Dean to be the clerk of the Finance Committee. Any additional conversation, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm
Okay,
taking notes
Just bring like a backup pen. Keep
anyway,
it
right?
fine. You're always taking notes, so.
all right. All right.
Morning routine.
That is our
You're gonna be
structure.
like, oh my
So
God.
department liaisons. Let's get these handed out. So for the newcomers, we typically go through and do assignments to the departments. Those, basically, as you heard us say, we basically run through, we meet with the department heads. You're basically just getting a very good understanding, running through their initial budget with them, getting an overall understanding. You're asking your own questions, but then you're potentially bringing those questions, the budget and the questions back to the committee, and we're having some discussions about it, especially if there's any moments. Obviously, I blanked out everybody. I just figured it would be a kind of appropriate, but we also, obviously, the committee members who have been on the committee have had their kind of standing departments. So I'm gonna jump right to you two, because I see you whispering.
Sidebar.
So, you wanna keep the school department? Yeah. Is everybody fine with Crystal and Melanie keeping the school department? Now, I will also say that the other caveat to this, is that we're not opposed to, the bigger departments, we typically have 2 people. If there's a department you'd like to learn more about, absolutely, we can have 3 people, like, especially with somebody like the school department, the police, the fire. So if you have a department you're incredibly interested in, don't be shy, you can be an add-on to that, as well. And Crystal, okay. Let's jump to the other bigger departments first. So let's jump to the fire department. Dan and myself did, no,
We did DPW.
who did I do fire with? Maybe I did fire,
I
but
think
I
you
don't.
ended up by yourself because
Oh,
it was
because of a
supposed to be-
dropout.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, was Jen?
I think I might have been supposed to be doing it, but I did it by myself, I think. So I was actually thinking about potentially switching, since police became available this year. I was actually thinking, since I've done fire a couple of years, I've jumped, do you want to do it? Does anybody else want to do fire with Dave, or just Dave can do it by himself? I mean, does anybody have an interest?
Yeah.
You want to do it?
Try that one,
Okay.
sure.
I'll tell you, it's one of the best departments to
It's
do.
not difficult.
It's not, he's super informative and he's got his stuff together. All right. So police, so I was thinking about, jumping on police this year. I'm certainly happy to do it by myself if anybody has an interest in doing it with me. You wanna do that with me? Okay,
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Kevin,
Yeah,
so,
Kevin, yeah.
yep, so Kevin and I will do police. And then DPW. I assume
I'll
you
stay
wanna
on that
stay
one.
on it. So would anybody like to do DPW with Dan?
I mean, John's pretty organized, right? I mean, you think it's.
He's very organized, yeah. And he spent a lot of time developing a presentation mirroring the police and fire last year, so I think this year, I don't think it'll be
Should
bad.
be.
Yeah,
I can do it.
yeah, that's fine.
That's
Okay, perfect. All right, so then we get down, I suppose, so last year we lumped, you kind of took a few of the key financial ones. Not that we pigeonholed her into a category, but who did you do?
I'd like to accountant, assessor, and treasurer. I'd definitely like to keep accountant,
Yeah,
and I'll keep the other 2 too. It doesn't matter to me, but if,
that was tax collector treasurer.
yeah, because I never even ended up meeting because Erica
Oh,
left,
yeah,
so the
so
treasurer
this year would
didn't
probably be
even-
really good. And then
Yeah.
assessor, did you do too, or no?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, they're all in the same hallway.
I know, I did like one Monday night,
it-
I
and
just came in.
And we really felt that, who's got the
It
right
worked.
experience for it, was an easy peasy. All right, let's go another larger, so,
We remember Kevin expressing interest in library?
Library, yeah.
oh, that's right.
Who did it last year? You
I,
Jennifer.
and,
was it me?
I don't know.
It was-
It might have been. I ended up doing a lot of something with him at the end. I was gonna,
Jen was starting it and you took it over.
and is that what happened?
Library.
I was thinking about maybe jumping on with you, maybe as a secondary, only because we've got some history, with some of the grid issues, and actually, Brian, you and I had some initial discussion about it too, so, maybe we even consider a joint meeting to have that conversation. So I'll jump on that. I'll throw myself on the sword. I will regret that.
Just write Laura and everything.
Oh, no, that's it, that's it, I'm done on mine. All right, so what else did we have for major complex veterans?
Who'd you
Health
have?
council,
I did
okay,
veterans, it's
Last
not
year,
good.
I filled in
that was my favorite, I love
I
doing
did
that.
veterans last year.
I'll, up to the new guys, is there any departments that you have a particular interest in that you'd like to?
I can do any of them. Building and planning, I can do that one, conservation, council on aging, wherever you, health department, doesn't matter.
Okay,
I do conservation, I get conservation across the street from me.
okay, so Dave, I'll give you building and planning.
Yep.
Joe, conservation.
Sure.
We'll take health again.
Crystal, you did health. Where am I?
That on the back?
Nope. Town clerk, you want to do town clerk, Kevin?
Yep.
Would like to do veterans while I'm on the back page.
I'll do that.
Okay. And then I think I have council on aging and board of selectmen. Who wants to do council on aging?
I can do that one, I only have one.
Oh, you only have one? Okay. How'd you get out of that?
I was gonna.
Notice you
apply
stayed
it,
quiet.
but
You're being-
Everyone was volunteer, this is great with 7 people.
I know, huh? And then we just have board of selectmen on all of the budget items. That's a kind of that miscellaneous catch. Do you want, I mean, you want I do it?
Sure.
Since you're gonna be meeting anyway,
Since, yeah, really. Even though I said I wasn't gonna take any more.
even though you said no.
Do you wanna, is there anything you
How
don't?
much it's easy,
Do you
just
need
approve
a-
it.
Which ones are you doing? There you go.
I'm doing police. I'm piggybacking on library. I'm not taking the
that's
lead on library, and you can't.
Kevin, just so
cannot.
you
Can't
know,
take
you're in
that
the
one.
lead for library.
Yeah,
Laura's
I'm
not really on it.
piggybacking. I'm gonna take a backseat. You'll learn that I don't
She's
really
just
have that
there.
Only
ability,
got
but.
one on Public Works, is that enough?
What?
There's only one on Public Works, is that enough?
You know, I can go on with you. I can go on with
Yep.
you.
Okay. Perfect. I think that's good. Yeah, that is great having
Yeah.
a full board for this part. All right. You actually just brought up something, Kevin, and I didn't say what it was, and now I forgot what it was. Okay.
Town clerk? No, because he took town clerk, so
I had something to do. I lost it.
it's gone.
It's gone. Forever.
Who's doing the health department?
Health is gonna be Crystal. So what I'll do is I'll type this up, we'll put it as part of our files, so everyone will have access to it. So have you already had your, we didn't discuss, we discussed level-headed. When are you gonna have that discussion with,
Well, now that you've basically said I can deviate from the 2% on the real needs, I'm gonna put that memo out. Well, actually, you know what? That memo's gonna come from this committee, gonna come from you. And that's gonna be, I'll write it, you edit it, circulate it,
okay,
and then we'll do a budget launch meeting at some point that's convenient, and make that presentation to the department heads.
so you want to do a joint meeting with the department heads, and we'll do it that way?
Yeah.
So that obviously needs to be sooner rather than later?
Yep.
Okay.
I think somewhere around, week before Thanksgiving. So I really want to,
So
I
that
really
doesn't
wanna
give us
change the-
much time for our liaison meetings, if we're looking for.
you can do liaison meetings anytime, because they're not, the budget's not due till the 15th of December.
But we're usually going through, we usually have already set the directive, I guess we'll call it. And then we usually
We
give
could
them
send the
a few
directive
days.
before Thanksgiving, before Halloween.
Yeah,
So, I'll write it tomorrow and I'll send it over to you by email
Not a
and you can edit
directive,
it.
it's an informative memo.
yeah. Well, we're directing you to get your budget done by this date.
Well, and I mean,
Due by December 15th.
We should
right?
probably send it with them, who's got what department, who your liaison is
Sure.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll be-
do we need to have a department head meeting if we're gonna meet with liaisons, or can we just say your liaisons will be in touch to go through this and answer questions and eliminate a meeting?
I mean, you're having a regular, do you
I
do,
always have a regular department head
Right.
meeting, so I can put somebody before them, if it's convenient, to say that I'm from the finance committee,
Yeah.
this is what we decided to do. One of the concerns I always have is, I'm not the voice of this committee.
Right,
Okay, and I don't wanna be the guy that stands up in front of my department heads and says, okay, not only am I, supervising, I'm also now deciding how your budget's gonna, that's this committee.
right.
What time is the meeting, when you have,
I usually have it in the morning, so, but,
Any particular
it
day?
can be adjustable, I usually like,
Fridays?
I can do a Friday.
I mean,
Um,
You
I
can do anytime.
usually do a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
I would
So-
think one of us could
oh, yeah.
free up our.
I just want the message not to be.
so I can,
Yep.
I can make time
Yep.
if you need it.
Sure. So, once we pick a date, and we'll find out who's available, who can represent.
Yeah.
I have a problem with more than one person shows up, because it's, a department head meeting, doesn't have to be publicly posted. So if you all show up, I don't care, because you're not in deliberation. So, that's not a problem. We'll let you know.
I think that's the way to go, as opposed to a separate.
Right. But I want
I do too.
the departments to know it's the committee. It isn't Brian, it's the committee.
It's all of us together.
No, I get your
We
point,
s-
though. It's
Yeah.
There's a
Together
separation
we
of
can.
duties.
Well, and we actually talked about this last year. We talked about having more interaction with the department heads, because again, this doesn't have to be a big secret process. We talk about transparency, we talk about, you know, that this is how it happens in the real world, right? This is, we all get, as managers, we all get into a room together and we have a discussion. Okay, perfect, so we'll work on that, we'll get that timing done, we'll get this list as part of it, and then we'll be able to, as part of the timing of the schedule, get our liaison meetings going. All right, that actually went way faster than I thought, okay. Real quick, we're gonna vote on, actually, let's do meeting cadence next, we'll mix it up a little bit, and then we'll do minutes at the end. So, I think getting our schedule fleshed out a little bit and a little more in depth will kind of help dictate how it's going to need to be January, February, March, April, May. Leading up to that, I think we'll have some flux. I think we probably still have a fairly decent amount of work to do ahead of time. I mean, does everybody feel, I think once a month makes me a little nervous at this point. I feel like we should probably meet, huh?
Well, it depends. You're gonna, once you start with the budget submissions,
Oh, no, I'm
Okay.
talking about like right now, even up to it. I think I'm kind of leaning towards every other week.
Up in, well, I would ask, what do we have, like, what would we be,
Like in 2 weeks, what would we be?
2 weeks, all
thinking
we'll be
about?
able to give you is revenue projections. And I can answer, I'll
And we
have copies
can-
of the financial statements for all of you, so
Yeah.
that, you know, we haven't gotten FY19 yet, so it'll be FY18, but give you an idea of where we are, and we'll actually have the name of the accountant on the outside. And I
Maybe
think
go
we
through
can
the
get you
revenue
the debt book,
sources. Yep,
which you've seen before, but I will get you the debt book so you know what we're servicing for debt. And,
I'm just thinking with the tight restriction of time to get the budgets and the meetings done by December 15th. It might be time better spent with each individual meeting. I mean, I don't know, we should still meet monthly by every stretch of the imagination, but,
And then
get
go
to January, we'll be going twice
Oh.
a
well,
week.
right, I mean, then I know it's gonna
January,
get
February will
crazy.
probably be every week.
Right.
Pretty close to every week, which is typically what we've done during all of the presentations.
Well, the meeting with the department heads is gonna be critical in order for us to kind
You set a
of really
tone.
move forward.
Right, because we can't
So
start
the
having
sooner
our
we can do
individual
that, the sooner we
meetings.
can get in gear, so they know what's
All right,
coming.
so let's get the
But I
letter
think-
done tomorrow,
yep.
you and I will consult on the schedule, I'll pick a date, we'll announce it to the department heads, and we'll have a memo ready to go. Okay,
I would
easy.
say that should happen, no later than,
Halloween.
yeah.
I would say latest first week in
Do you
November.
have a
mean,
department head
Halloween's-
meeting already scheduled for
Yeah.
next week? Okay.
No, and a reason for that is I'm waiting for, what do you
For
guys wanna
this,
do?
okay.
Do you think we need to review revenue first?
We can do
we
that
haven't-
as well.
Because we haven't reviewed the revenue numbers at all. So we're gonna walk into this meeting and make a proclamation without seeing revenue numbers. I think we
But
probably.
we're not giving an ultimatum saying it's a 2%.
No, we're
So
just saying
we're
low
going, we're
end.
taking a different approach, so I think it's okay without the revenue.
I've already told them flat out, revenue is not gonna be what it was last year, so be careful. There's no reason that you can't mimic that.
Yeah.
Well, these guys keep like a running list of all the new stuff they wanna do,
Oh, yes.
and then we just pull some
And then
out and
some.
throw it into this year's budget, or depending on urgency or whatever.
A little more formal than that, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some will come in, and one of the things I'm really looking forward is if you could come up with some way to do it more efficiently and get a better result, even if it costs more money, but it creates savings later, I'm very interested. If you're just spending money, I'm not terribly interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could meet in 2 weeks, but I'm thinking in between that
Well,
department head meeting and
We don't
December
have to, so we
15th.
don't have to set our next meeting yet. I want to just have a general sense, because to your point, we don't want to keep doing willy-nilly.
Right.
I'd like to get something a little bit more standardized on the books. And, you know, with the new members, I'd love to be able to get the new members,
Second
up.
Tuesday, what are you thinking?
yeah.
Tuesdays and Wednesdays, are those good days for people?
Sure.
We've historically kind of run on Tuesdays. We don't by any means have to. We even talked about, you know, potentially every other Monday opposite the selectmen's.
What if
Oh,
you-
great.
What if you met like, what if we all,
Here anyway.
what if we all reached out to our liaisons and then came back here November 12th and report back, and you'll have that meeting that you talked about?
Yeah.
That gives a
That's
couple,
scheduled,
3
you'll
weeks.
know, yeah.
That make sense?
Yeah, I think let's get the meeting scheduled first. To Dave's point, we'll get them the liaison list so we can introduce everybody, make sure they know who it is.
Yep.
Let's see when we can get that scheduled, and then maybe we schedule the next meeting then basically after that.
So
once
that
we
would
give
be
you
under the
time.
idea that we haven't met with our departments yet.
Yeah, because
At
we
the
have
next
to, we have to
meeting.
do that.
The only
We have to do the
requirement is
kickoff.
you meet the department before they come in for their presentation.
Right.
So when she gives us a schedule of when the appointments are, then you know how much time you have to get your
We
appointment
usually
in.
well, like last year, we scheduled the appointments kind of based on who was ready first. I mean, a lot of it was.
So, yeah, and the reality is, you know, you're gonna go to, you know, police, fire, DPW, they're already thinking
could do
about
it
it.
now.
They're
Right.
already doing it,
Fire could do it
right?
right this second.
Yeah, he could. He probably already has most of it
We'll deal
done,
with that.
let's be clear. So, I think let's focus on this then. Let's focus on the memo, getting the meeting scheduled, the department heads have that discussion, get them a liaison list. Then I'll communicate with everybody if you're not at the meeting, and then we can say, go. And we can start that, and then we'll, based on when that happens, then we can think about scheduling our next meeting. But we're gonna run into the holidays really quickly, so I think that's kind of my thing, is I wanna make sure that we kind of have a little bit of a sense of what needs to get done.
can
I'll
search
flush out
her.
the schedule,
Why
I
don't
know.
we plan to say the 12th to meet? Assuming that we will have done the budget,
Oh, yeah,
the
that
meeting with
initial
the
meeting will have
department
happened by then, yeah.
So
I
does
want
that
you to
make
know,
sense?
if you're not efficient and you don't get through it, there's Saturday. There will be
How many of
retribution.
us are going Saturday?
Oh, yeah, that's on my agenda, yep. So, I'm gonna put November 12th as a
Yeah,
tentative.
something fun.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's just do real quick. I'm gonna meet my deadline, no matter what.
When's your deadline?
2 hours. I just don't believe we have to go
I think you're an
longer.
overachiever, you should try to beat your deadline.
Challenge accepted. So, this is an example of this is an example, these are the last minutes, from the last meeting. So, for the purposes of approving these minutes, only the members who were committee members will be voting on these minutes tonight. So, I emailed them out, everybody got back to me.
Motion to approve is written
A
or
second?
presented.
Who's doing this? Did you do this? Okay.
Great job, by
This
the
is
way.
really, this is very
Very
brief
good.
for me too, by the way.
This is all you need.
No.
She's at a few pages.
The warrant minutes are a little long. I think my max was 7 or 8 pages this year with the warrant, because we had to do all the votes and.
I'll teach you how to do it faster.
Where were you
I'll have
3
my
years
computer
ago, Brian?
I think I'll have my computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I like to stay caught up, doesn't happen often. Okay. Cadence. Okay, open items, again, just wanna remind, open meeting law training Monday night. Just reminder, I don't know who's going, cause some
Did
people.
we RSVP as a committee? Because I got an
It got a little
email
confusing,
today.
cause I got an
Yeah, Rebecca's, I just,
So
I
should-
got her
I know.
email.
We're just
I
trying to
thought
get
we
a
got-
meal count.
You
So
don't,
should I
Oh,
reply
okay.
to
Is that
Rebecca's
what's
email?
no, cause you replied
there's
to
food?
me,
Okay.
and I replied for
Yeah, if
whoever
you come
replied
at
to me,
6,
but then
it's
some people
pizza.
replied on their own, cause
6?
I didn't realize she said department heads pass this on,
Yeah.
and then
A
I did.
ballpark would work for me, we just need to know
So-
how many pizzas to buy.
Yep. So
Oh,
I've,
well, when you put it that
Where are we
way.
getting pizza from?
I RSVP'd.
It's really, if you don't want any pizza, don't RSVP.
Right. So I did RSVP for those who
There'll be
contacted me
Tums
directly.
available.
So that's Monday night, and then this Saturday is more excitement because a couple of us, you two are going, right, to Saturdays? They're both looking at me with like deer in the headlights.
They're like, what
You're
are we
going,
doing?
right?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm not.
no, yeah,
But there's-
we signed up for the Municipal Finance Committee Annual Meeting Conference
Bridgewater State.
at Bridgewater State.
nice and local.
You'll be very pleased. It's
Yeah,
very
I
educational.
believe
The
you both
agenda
responded
looks
yes to me, and
really
I
good 'cause
believe
it
I
looks
registered
like
you
it's a
both.
lot, like just short bits about
it's
a lot
right
of
here in front
things.
of me.
We'll try not to bore you, but
Yeah, that's why it looked like there was probably why they have so much stuff, so it's
we'll
like,
get some handouts so you can
15
study, and then
minutes
you can
on
ask me
each thing.
questions, and then I'll lie to you.
Yes, I did. I had Joe and Kevin down and Melanie has responded back yes. So we're registered. I haven't, you didn't receive an email
no.
from them. I have not received any
No, 'cause
email
I
with
don't know
updated
where it is
information.
or
That's
anything.
what
Like
I'm,
I-
so I'm gonna hang on for another 24, 48 hours, and, if not, I'll have to reach out and get the specifics. Look back on your emails. I'm gonna actually give you the confirmation, just to hold on to, that you're registered. You can go on their website and look at the agenda. It actually does look very interesting, and they have some interesting breakout sessions. They have one
I was
on,
wondering if you get to do like all of them, if they just do short, brief ones, if you pick two, it doesn't say.
it doesn't say, very abbreviated. So budgeting 101, credit and bond rating, weathering the storm, improving your town's resiliency, reading and understanding financial statements, capital planning, and financial trend monitoring. Sounds like a great way to end our Saturday.
It's supposed to
So-
rain anyways.
Yeah, there you go. So for those of you in attendance, I will hopefully get some information shortly, and we'll pass it on. Okay. Are there any additional
Text me.
open items anybody would like to discuss? Any questions from the new members? Yeah, and like I said, I'd love to get you guys, like, some documents and some, something to help kinda, I know it's gonna be like completely overwhelming, but,
I'll get you some big
Discuss.
paperwork you can carry around
yeah.
just to get
We'll
used
give
to.
you a pile, make you feel right at home.
budget season.
Downsides this year.
I know, I noticed.
I know now
Excellent.
you'll have
Now
to.
I'm like,
now you're gonna have to go get a new notebook.
So, no other items?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Second.
All right, any conversation? All right, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
8:12.
There you
Beat
go.
it.